Mr. Doran and Mr. Hanna, thank you for your testimony and for providing valuable information to this committee, which sheds lights on the deceptive manner in which the Obama administration sold out the American people and our allies across the globe with the Iran capitulation agreement. Even when presented with the facts, like the facts each of you have laid out in your testimony, the administration balks, doubles down, and tries to discredit anyone who disagrees with their false narrative, including me. When asked about Ben Rhodes' revelatory interview with the New York Times Magazine, Press Secretary Josh Earnest dodged and decided to lambaste several members of Congress, including me, as liars, truly eliciting Alinsky's principles to their core. Why? Because I said that under this illegal Iran deal and lifting sanctions, that Iran would be able to access up to $100 billion that was previously frozen. His Treasury Secretary, Jack Lew, stated that sanctions relief would be worth about $100 billion. The president of Iran said his country would get $100 billion. Despite the fact that I said something similar in September of 2015, the White House is now trying to brand me as a liar in attempting to deflect Ben Rhodes' recent statements. The point is not whether it's $100 billion or $50 billion or whether it's all at once or over a period of time. The real problem is that President Obama is funding the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. Iran is no friend to the United States, to Christians, to Jews, or even Sunni Muslims. Iran is a rogue nation hell-bent on nuclear war in the Middle East. A responsible president who loves this country and supports our allies would never lift sanctions and give this murderous regime money, much less billions. This deal is a strain on our national character. Our next president, we can only hope, will terminate this nonsense and promote freedom, accountability, and opportunity overseas, not a regime that stones women, hangs homosexuals, and kills members of other religions and political beliefs. White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest suggested that I show up to the Oversight Committee. Well, here I am. Where's Ben Rhodes? I guess you can run and hide. Now, Mr. Doran, much of the news coverage recently had focused on Mr. Rhodes and the lies and misinformation that he had spun relating to the Iran deal. However, we know that no one operates in a vacuum. Does Mr. Rhodes represent a rogue employee of the White House, or does this spin campaign represent something more deeply about how the White House handled the Iran deal?
I believe it represents the President's strategic vision and the President's will. The President is on record as early as 2006 saying that he wanted to improve relations with Iran and Syria, and that he saw Iran and Syria as sharing core interests in stabilizing Iraq, and that we should work with them to do that. I don't think he ever lost that.
So you would say that he actually is ultimately responsible for developing this go-out frame of capitulation?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the key factor to understand why we made all of these concessions to Iran, because we're not actually trying to stop it from getting a nuclear weapon. We're trying to develop a partnership with it.
Yeah. Unfortunately, as you said, the lies and misrepresentation that are deeply woven deep within the Iran capitulation agreement are just the latest example of a culture of deception that has been this administration's MO since its inception. Let's not forget that this is the same administration that sold the American people out to the insurance companies under the guise of health care reform. The President and his congressional minions drove a legislative garbage truck full of special interest giveaways through Congress and over Americans' pocketbook by knowingly and willfully repeating the lie, if you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. This is the same administration that blatantly violated federal law by engaging in unlawful lobbying in order to promote its Waters of the United States regulation. The Government Accountability Office confirmed that the executive branch, under the direction of EPA Administrator McCarthy, unleashed an illegal propaganda campaign in order to force WOTUS down the throats of the American people. Mr. Rubin, it is clear that the Obama administration had a covert agenda to reach a deal with Iran at any cost that was driven more by the optics of diplomacy and legacy than the real facts on the ground. What are the dangers of such a narrative-driven approach to policymaking?
When one calibrates policy to a fantasy that is constructed rather than to reality, the cost is often paid with blood. Iran has not become any less of a terror sponsor as a result of the JCPOA. In fact, if we just take the $50 billion figure, that's 10 times the annual official budget of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. One thing I would do, sir, productively, is take the ability of the State Department, take the ability to designate state sponsors of terrors out of the hands of the State Department and put it in an independent commission so it doesn't become a political football?
I thank the gentleman, and this behavior has become the status quo for an Obama administration that has blatantly disregarded the rule of law and the respect for the American people to enact its partisan agenda. It's a dangerous precedent, and it needs to be stopped by Congress. Thank you, Chairman.
Gentleman's